Shalom. I want to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Kakwadash, and double honors to our elders and apostles, a great millstone that taught us this truth. Peace, love, and salutations to the hopeful like Akim, teaching and preaching this truth with all righteousness and sincerity. The Sakya Wasap. Today's lesson is entitled, "And deliver his servants that trusted in him." And Lord willing, you edified through the Spirit and power of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, which are the true names of the Heavenly Father and his beloved Son in the Paleo Hebrew. And as always, the sit downs, the lessons, the street speaking is for the remnant, the elect, the Israel, the Most High, to use the gospel preached. All right. And delivered his servants that trusted in him, which is part of a precept that's found here in Daniel, the 3rd chapter, which is a great chapter to read concerning victory over the adversaries. All right. At this time, you had Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. All right. They didn't want to fall down and worship the golden image which Nebuchadnezzar had set up. All right. And the decree from the king, all right, was that whosoever did not fall down at the sound of the sackbut, the psaltery, the dulcimer, and all kinds of music before the golden image, was that they should be put to death in a burning fiery furnace. In the integrity that these Judites had, these so-called black men, all right, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, all right, had it to where, look, they wasn't bowing down worshiping the idol, all right, and they chose death rather than to idol worship, and the Lord delivered them. All right, and these different accounts, the history, all right, of our forefathers, all right, builds up courage for us in these times, because Esau, he's building up an image. All right, he's building up an idol that people should worship. All right, we often speak on Revelation 13, where it speaks about these Edomites causing all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive that subcutaneous device under the skin, and with it you will be able to buy and sell. So these NWOs we see have come and they have gone. All right, all these heathens have at one point in time tried to, establish their agenda in the earth to cause everybody to submit to it. All right, so I'm gonna read a little bit into Daniel, the 3rd chapter. All right, hopefully this is comforting to the members of the hopeful elect. All right, let me start here in Romans, the 15th chapter, which the book of Romans was an epistle that Apostle Paul wrote to the Israelites that were in Rome. He was building them up with the counsel of Yahushua, which is the spirit of prophecy, and pushing repentance and converting and worshiping the true power, getting them out of that Gentile state of mind, idol worshiping, or in vain customs. So here in Romans 15:4, it says, "For whatsoever things were written aforetime, our history, were written for our learning." All right, we're supposed to learn from these accounts. All right, there's jewels, there's secrets, there's mysteries in these historical accounts that we read in the Bible. It says that we, the members of the hopeful elect, the believers, through patience and comfort of the scriptures, might have hope. So that's what I want to push. Comfort of the scriptures, that you might have hope. And hope is synonymous with faith. All right, so we're going to read a little bit into this chapter. You want to start the first verse. All right, but I'm going to hit it at 19. It says Daniel's friends protected. Okay, and Daniel, along with Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, they were Israelites. We go here to Daniel, the 1st chapter. Let me see. All right. Daniel chapter 1:1, it says, "In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it." All right, they besieged our temple. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hands, with part of the vessels of the house of the Most High, which he carried into the land of Shinar, which is Babylon, to the house of his God. And he brought the vessels into the treasures house of his God. And the king spake to Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel and of the king's seed and of the princes. So Nebuchadnezzar was rounding up um, um, basically Israelites of the king's seed of the royal line of Judah. Children in whom was no blemish, but well favored and skillful in all wisdom, in cunning and knowledge, and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning in the tongue of the Chaldeans. So they want to build these men up so they can stand before the presence of the king, but they had to be on the level first, as you see. Verse 5, and the king appointed them daily provisions of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. So they had their daily provisions, their food and their wine. Now among these were the children of Judah. All right, so these were so-called black men: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. All right, so these were the king's seed, and these men, they were skillful in all wisdom, no blemish, well favored. All right, these were, you know, top men. Unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names, for he gave unto Daniel the name of Belshazzar, Salakia, and Hananiah of Shadrach, and to Mishael of Meshach, and to Azariah of Abednego. So they gave them, different names. All right. I believe Daniel was named after an idol. But so this is who we're reading about in Daniel, the 3rd chapter, when it says Daniel's friends protected. So here in Daniel, the 3rd chapter, once again, you want to read into it. They didn't want to fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar set up. All right, and they chose death rather than to defile themselves with idol worship. And the Lord wrought a great victory for them. And that's what the Lord is going to do for his elect in these times. Those that don't submit to Esau's image. All right. Those that don't take the mark. All right, the Lord is going to grant a victory for them. Daniel 3:19. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, in the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And like we were reading in Daniel, the 1st chapter, these men were set up to stand before the king in his palace. So once he got word that these men wasn't worshiping the image, because the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up, it was a decree throughout all his kingdom that everybody was to fall down and worship it. Just like we read about Esau in Revelation 13, he causes all. Nebuchadnezzar, he caused all, but he couldn't get the Lord's elect. Therefore he spake, and once he heard that these men wasn't doing that, he was pissed off, and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. So he turned the fire up in the furnace, and he commanded the most mighty men. He commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Now we running parallels. All right, when Esau come down with great wrath upon those that fear Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua, he gonna be sending his most mighty men. He gonna be sending robots. He's gonna be sending these robotic dogs. He's gonna be sending drones. He's gonna be sending all his mighty technology to seek and find the men of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua. All right, but we understand, pursuant to the prophecies in Isaiah 59:19, that when the enemy shall come in like a flood, the spirit of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua shall lift up a standard against him. And we reading an example of that here. And it's going to be happening with the men of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua, the believers. Verse 21. Then these men were bound in their coats and their hosens and their hats and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent and the furnace was exceeding hot, the flame of the the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Divine intervention. And you already know these men which believed in Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua, their faith was instantly increased more than what it was when they saw that the fire slew those men. Oh shit, the power with us. Look, the niggas that came and tried to bound us up and throw us in the furnace, they did. All right. And these three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound in the midst of the burning fiery furnace. So they in there. They in the fire. All right. And that's sometimes the circumstances that we have to deal with in the faith. Sometimes you gonna be in the fire, but the Lord is gonna be with us. All right. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astounded, and rose up in haste and spake and said unto his counselors, did not we cast 3 men bound in the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, true, O king. He answered and said, lo, I see 4 men loose walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. In the form of the 4th is like the son of Yahweh. So Yahushua was in there with those men in the fire. All right. And like we read in Romans 15:4, the things that are written aforetime were written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the scriptures might have hope. We see an example of men that trusted in Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua in a very dangerous situation. They was faced with death, and the Lord was right there with them, and they didn't, as it says here, they have no hurt. They didn't get hurt. All right. And the same thing with us. Are we going to be in these situations where it doesn't look like no way out? All right. And the Lord is going to lift up a standard for us and deliver us and be right there with us. Verse 26, then Nebuchadnezzar came near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High Power, come forth and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire. They came up out of there. Call Allah Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua. And the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose body the fire had no power, nor was a hair on their head singed, neither was their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. Yahushua controlled the elements, man. You know, remember the things, the earth was created for our sakes. All right. The Most High has given the Israelite man power over the elements. And we can control things once the Lord give us that power. And Yahushua had that power. And we seen what Yahushua was doing with that power. He was raising the dead. He was killing. He was cleansing the lepers. All right. Healing the maimed, the halt. The blind received their sight. Like I said, the lepers were cleansed. He was able to increase food. He was able to disappear, reappear, so on and so forth. So the Lord Yahushua being able to control the heat of the flame, that's light work to Yahushua. And we see it. Verse 28, then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, blessed be the power of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who have sent his angel, Yahushua, and delivered his servants that trusted in him. So in order to be eligible for this type of divine intervention, you got to trust in Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua, even when the odds are stacked up against you. And of course, it's easier to say these things on these lessons, but you know, we want to speak these things into existence. All right, because we don't know what type of lot we're going to have when the shit hit the fan. All right, so we want to be able to trust in him so we can receive this type of deliverance, these strange deliverances, man, these strange acts. All right, because Esau, what he wants to do is he wants to make it seem like he's the only power, that he is the Most High and none else is beside him. That's the energy that Esau is pushing out. But we believe in a power that's greater than Esau that's greater than a gun, greater than AI, greater than a robot, greater than drones, greater than flock cameras, greater than satellites that can deliver us out of whatsoever our enemies plan to bring upon us. All right, let's go over here real quick. I'm thinking about something. Psalm 64. Psalm 64 and 9. All men shall fear, talking about the believers, and shall declare the work of the Most High, which is what we're doing on these lessons. For they shall wisely consider his doing, talking about Esau, because pursuant to the prophecies, these Edomites is going to get revealed and exposed and consumed by the spirit of the Lord's mouth, which is us. The righteous shall be glad in Yahweh and shall trust in him, and all the upright in heart shall glory. Talking about the elect. All right. So trusting in him has these benefits, man. Deliverance, joy, glory. All right. So on and so forth. But back in Daniel 3 and 28, then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, blessed be the power of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Nebuchadnezzar gave praises to the Most High. Something that Esau don't do. All right. Who have sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word and yielded their bodies that they might not serve nor worship any God except their own power. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the power of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces. And that's how we know that, these nations, once Yahweh Shai come and bring justice and judgment in the earth and establish the kingdom, these nations, they're going to be in slavery. They're going to be under our feet. They're going to be subject under us. All right. But it's going to be levels amongst them. All right. Esau, he going to be on the lowest, but then there's going to be some that the Lord may show favor. Not favor like an Israelite would, but they ain't going to be in straits like Esau, because we see that the Lord put the spirit on Nebuchadnezzar to give praises, which in the next chapter, Daniel, the 4th chapter, Nebuchadnezzar did get humbled. All right. The Lord did cut down that tree. All right. But, because he was likened unto a beast, eating grass and all these different things. The Lord took the spirit out of him and made him like an animal. But even then, he came back and gave praises. So, I speak as a man. These nations, they're going to be in servitude and captivity, but it's going to be levels. Esau going to be on the lowest, though. Shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other power that can deliver after this sort. So he acknowledged the power of Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So, these men had high positions in Babylon, starting off with Daniel all the way into King Cyrus. All right, but what we read here is a marvelous and strange deliverance the Lord enabled for those that trusted in him. And we're looking to receive the same reward. Let's finish off over here in Isaiah 19, which goes into prophecies concerning the spiritual Egypt, which is America. All right. And the deliverer is going to come to those that trust in Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua. Isaiah 19 and 19. In that day, there shall be an altar to Yahweh in the midst of the land of Egypt. The various camps that you see out on the highways and the byways all throughout America. All right, that's prophecy. And the pillar at the border thereof to Yahweh out there on the streets. And it shall be a sign and for a witness unto Yahweh of hosts in the land of Egypt. For they shall cry unto Yahweh because of their oppressors. We're going to have an outcry. We have an outcry. And he shall send them a savior and a great one, and he shall deliver them. So as we sign and crying because of the oppressors is going to come down. All right. Going back to Psalm 64. Psalm 64 and 1. Hear my voice, O power, and my prayer preserve my life from the fear of the enemy. All right, this is our outcry. Part of our outcry is against the enemy, starting off with Esau, Edom. Psalm 83. Hide me from the secret counsel of the wicked, from the insurrection of the workers of iniquity, who whet their tongue like a sword. This word whet here means to sharpen. They perfect their sword, and their sword isn't limited to just weapons. Their sword is also laws, legislations, policies, decrees, and their media. So they perfect those things and bend their bows to shoot their arrows, even bitter words. All right, that they may shoot in secret at the perfect, the elect. Their agenda is a secret agenda that's aimed directly at the Israelites. I don't care how they try to present it in the media. The energy crisis and the fuel crisis, in the food crisis and the diseases, all this stuff is geared to destroy Israelites, starting off with the elect. Suddenly they shoot at him and fear not. All right, they not fearing the Most High. All right. They encourage themselves in the evil matter. They commune of laying snares privately. Snares is traps. They say, who shall see them? And see, for a long time, their secrecy was a power to them. Them being able to hide their identity, that was a superpower to them. But now they've been exposed and revealed by the spirit of the Lord's mouth, which are the prophets. They search out iniquities through their technology. They accomplish a diligent search through the internet, through their history. Both the inward thought of every one of them in the heart is deep. These devils is coming after the working of Satan. Satan, leads them. But the Most High shall shoot at them with an arrow, the missiles during World War III, or as the scriptures call it, the third woe. Suddenly shall they be wounded. Instantly they're going to be put to death. So shall they make their own tongues fall upon themselves, the insiders. These Edomites that was, once amongst the CIA, the FBI, these different groups. They was done wrong. So they come out on the internet and they expose the inner workings of these groups. All right, and they expose them. All right, they're called whistleblowers. It says, all that see them shall flee away, and all men shall fear and declare the work of the Most High. That's us. For they shall wisely consider his doings. All right, seeing what Esau got going. The righteous shall be glad in Yahweh and shall trust in him, and all the upright in heart shall glory. So there's a victory for those that trust in Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, just like we seen the victory of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego on Nebuchadnezzar and on his policy and on his agenda. And Yahushua was right there with them in the fire. So the Lord gonna do that with us. Lord willing, we are part of the elect and we enduring to the end. We seen these things happen before. There's no new thing under the sun. That which have been is that which shall be, and there's no new thing under the sun. All right, the Lord gonna come through for his once again. I want to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Kakwadash, and double honors to our elders and apostles of Great Millstone that taught us the truth. Shalom, Akim, stay watching.